controversial comment from Manitoba's premier.
I want to thank Joanna for dressing up. I want to thank her for those heels.
Why one expert says Pallister's words were problematic, and the woman he was talking about weighs in.
CTV News. Live from downtown Winnipeg with Gord LeClaire and Marilee Caruso.
Premier Brian Pallister is facing criticism tonight for comments he made about the chairperson of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, Johanna Hermé.
Pallister opened his State of the Province address by thanking Hermé for dressing up and wearing high heels. The Premier issued a statement Thursday night saying the remark was an awkward reference and he meant no offense. But some see the comments as problematic despite the Premier's intentions. CTV's Josh Crabb joins us once again now, live from the Manitoba Legislative Building with more reaction to this.
Yeah, Josh, the Premier, of course, issued his clarification last night. Have we heard from Hermé yet?
Well, Gord, after Hermé heard about the comments and after the Premier made those comments, she faced the burden of responding to media requests about the Premier's remarks by issuing a statement of her own late this afternoon. And she called out Brian Pallister for focusing on her shoes as opposed to her work. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister was welcomed with applause by a crowd of around 1,200 business people attending his State of the Province address. But the opening remarks of his speech were met with a noticeably cool reception.
I want to thank Joanna for dressing up. I want to thank her for those heels. I noticed they are a foot high.
The Premier was talking about Johanna Hermé, a highly accomplished architect and chair of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce. Pallister, whose arm remains in a sling following a hiking mishap in New Mexico, didn't stop there.
It is a humbling experience to come to you today, not just in this condition, but having Joanna cut my meat for me meant a lot to me.
Hermé issued a statement saying she doesn't believe the Premier's comments were ill-intended, but she can't ignore them because they highlight a much bigger issue. She says she had just finished a presentation on urban sprawl, and she believes the Premier was attempting to acknowledge her presence in the room. He unfortunately chose to do so not based on my work or content of that presentation, but rather make a joke about the fact I was wearing tall shoes. This, combined with the fact that the event took place in front of nearly 1,200 business leaders of our province, does require it to be called out and addressed. Unfortunately, similar situations continue to be all too familiar for women in leadership positions across Canada.
She shouldn't be in that situation. She shouldn't have been put in that situation where people want her to say something, because that's not her role. She's there as the chair of the Chamber of Commerce.
Regardless of the intention, this associate professor in business who studied gender in the workplace says it doesn't take away from how inappropriate the comments were, especially given they came from the Premier of a province.
So we're reinforcing the stereotype of woman as object, like she's wearing high heels, she's all dressed up, and the caregiver. So I have this woman sitting beside me cutting up my meat like a mother would for the child.
The Premier offered no further response to his comments on Friday, but said in a statement Thursday night, "Given my tall stature, I am particularly aware of my height and often make lighthearted comments about being taller than the people around me." The Premier said, "I can see how they could be easily misconstrued. That was never my intention, and I meant no offense of any kind to Johanna." The opposition says the Premier's explanation isn't good enough.
I would expect that there would be a lot more understanding of what those comments meant to women in general, but particularly to the woman that they were directed towards.
Hermé, who's currently out of town on business, tells us today she had a chance to share her thoughts on this topic with Premier Pallister during a phone call.
So, Josh, has Pallister apologized then for these comments?
In her statement, Hermé says, quote, Pallister has expressed his regrets. Now, she tells us she wants to move on from this specific incident and focus on the bigger picture, removing these types of comments from the business setting altogether.
All right, thanks for this, Josh.